Welcome to Booktopia TV. I'm John Purcell and I'm here with Christos Tsiolkas, award-winning writer of The Slap, Dead Europe, and his new novel is about to be released, is Barracuda. Welcome, Christos.
It's a real pleasure, John. Thank you.
First I want to talk about a little bit about the success of The Slap. Do you have any idea of how many countries and how many copies and how many viewers even that have enjoyed the story?
I know that it's been translated in, I think it's 24 or 25 languages. I kind of keep that to one side. It's the smaller moments that make you aware that it's got a life so beyond you. So, for example, I was in Sweden recently, and just that these group of women were discussing the novel and discussing the TV series, it kind of blew me away that you're really the opposite side of the planet that this is happening. But in terms of for myself as the writer of this book called The Slap, that journey feels so. It's gone outside of myself. It's somewhere else.
Yeah. I've read Barracuda. It's a very complex novel, and I feel there may be a little bit of trouble in telling me what it's about. I mean, what was so wonderful with The Slap was you could set up the premise and go, that's what it's about in about 4 words. How do you explain the novel? When you say the novel's about blah, what do you say?
It's about a young working class boy, Danny, who wants to be an Olympic swimmer, and his pursuit of that dream and how he fails. And the other thing, the short, and I had this on top of, on the wall above the computer when I was working on the book, was how do you be a good man? And for me, if you demanded a short answer to what that novel is about, it's about how do you be a good man? How do you come back from an absolute, something really shameful or something that really destructive, something that can you make atonement for it? Can you be forgiven for it? And that was really what I was searching to do in that book. I had this envy about the cleanness, that's how I saw it, of the sporting achievement. Okay, so for someone like Danny, the first one to swim the 200 metres, you are the best in your school, in comp, in your country, in the world, depending on what the meat is. And so I was envious of that, and I thought I want to try and deal with questions of success and of failure through writing about a sports person and writing about this young boy. The novel takes Danny from 13 to his early 30s, so we see him as a man, and the way it works with structure, it kind of alternates between the adult and the boy. But because I was in my mid-40s when I started writing the novel, I had a certain, I guess, tenderness towards Danny, and it made me start thinking of the way we treat our sports people. These are really young kids who are so disciplined, they work so hard, they're so obsessed. We make them gods and goddesses, but if they do one mistake, if we tear them apart. And I wanted to. And I didn't realise this when I first started working on the novel, but that became something I became really fascinated about writing, that subject. If I had been 18, 19, 20 and had that kind of obsession and I had those kind of opportunities, God knows what I would have done. I would have been a little shit. I know it.
Has this success put any pressures on you as a writer?
Scotland features a little bit in Barracuda, and I was very lucky. I got a residency for 3 months northwest of Glasgow on the Scottish coast, some of the most beautiful terrain on the planet. And what that allowed me to do was breathe and just think about what I wanted to write, and just to think about what Christos Tsiolkas. I mean, you get the question a lot, who do you write for? And usually you try, it's quite a complicated question but ultimately I wrote this book for myself. It was the book I needed to write, and I once I started work on it, and once, the first draft, I still wasn't sure after the first draft whether this was the book that I was going to put out to the world. But in the working on it, I became excited by just the act of writing, and so and once I got excited, then I thought. I actually stopped thinking about the slap. I stopped thinking about everything else. I just thought about writing Barracuda. I mean, of course, everything else happening in my world around me was there. But in terms of writing, it was only Barracuda. And really, to be honest, it's only since the novel's been finished and it's now coming out that those questions are rushing back into my consciousness. But yeah, I was lucky. For 2 years, I kind of put them aside.
Do you believe Australia is a classless society?
No.
And short answer.
No, I mean, I certainly don't. I think that in lots of ways Barracuda is a book about class. As I said, Danny's a working class boy who gets ripped from his world and placed into another world, an elite school, and confronts class. I think class is even more acute at work at the moment than it was when I was a young boy of Danny's age. But I think class has also changed, and some of the stereotypes we have of what class is are no longer valid.
One question that I've been dying to get to. In the book, you mentioned Danny's reading, and I've seen interviews with you before, and you talk about your reading. What are the real influential books in your reading life? Not just for writing, but just for who you are.
The late 19th century novel was such a huge influence for me because it just it brought me to reading, and it's still the most delicious pleasure to be in it. So Tolstoy, Dostoevsky, Thomas Hardy, Charles Dickens, they were, and even a bit earlier, the Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights. I mean, they were, I read those books. Stendhal, The Red and the Black. They feel like they are just core to me. And look, as a young adult, I have to say that there was also. So I'm talking about my adolescence and novels that still have an influence on me. But the Rushdie of Shame and Midnight Children, because I am a child of the great immigrations of the 20th century, and so his way of making a poetry from that experience was incredibly important to read. And I had a copy of Midnight Children that I carried around with me, for a very long time.
I think I may have got that copy in my second-hand bookshop. I didn't buy it. What is this thing? No, thank you very much for talking with me.
Been a pleasure.
Christos Tsiolkas' new book, Barracuda, is available from Booktopia now. I urge you to buy it.